Hi, I'm Barry Maxwell, your instructor for American Government Political Science 202, and here to explain why I think politics matters to you, and that this class isn't just something you got to take to graduate. Looking at these numbers, probably none of you have any idea what this means. If you want to pause and take a look at them and try and figure it out, go ahead. All will be revealed later, though, as far as what this stuff has to do with voting and so on. So, what is politics? Well, I've got this normal little joke about breaking the word down. Poly, meaning many, ticks, meaning blood-sucking insects, and putting them together to talk to you about politicians and politics. But let's just go to where the word really came from. Originally, the Greek word polis had to do with the way they ran their city-states in a somewhat democratic fashion. And a more practical definition, though, given that there's never enough of things to go around, not enough food, land, jobs, you name it. So politics is what gets used to figure out who gets what, when they get it, and how they get it. Again, when there's not enough of everything to go around. So, why should you care? Well, remember, you're part of that competition I was just talking about to get resources that are out there. So, you're in a game that I'll call American politics. I don't call it that because it's funny or trivial, but because there are rules about how it works. And in this competition, there are winners and losers. So, some come out with more stuff than others do. Sometimes a whole lot more. So the winners can win big, losers can lose big, and again, you're part of that competition. So I'll assume that most of you have played Monopoly or have at least heard of it, sort of as a simulation for life. You understand that you start at the go and work your way around the board by rolling the dice, and you land on things, spots, and things happen to you there, good things, bad things, opportunities, cost, and whatnot. This game has fixed rules also. There's a book you can read. They're a lot more limited and specific than politics. But as an example, yeah, there's rules. As I said, you land on a spot, and opportunities or costs or both are offered to you. And if you learn the rules and you're smart about it, and with some luck, you can do well in this game. So imagine that in this game, the players could vote on changing the rules of the game during the game, while it's going on. So maybe there's a spot where people get taxed, and the players in the game can vote on changing what the rents are that are charged when you land on property, change how much you get when you pass go, maybe more, maybe less than the $200, who pays taxes, who doesn't. And that those are all variables, again, voted on while the game is going on. And you can also decide who gets some of that tax money back for their own purposes. Maybe there's a square that you land on that says, hey, you're drafted. And the voters in the game can decide who gets deferred from the draft, who's eligible, who's not, and so on. Who gets college education and who doesn't, and who gets to pay for it. Maybe you pay for it if you're getting it. Maybe you get other people to pay for it. Again, rules of the game that can be voted on. And same for health care. If you're sick, do you get care? And if so, who pays for it? You or somebody else? Politics decides all that for us. And it decides who pays taxes and how much they pay. Who gets government money and benefits, such as student loans that some of you might be getting. Who gets abortions or not? Who gets medical care and doesn't? And if you do, how much you pay for it, and whether you get somebody else to pay for it. Is there a minimum wage? How much is it? Who does it apply to? If there's a natural disaster, earthquakes, storms, whatnot, does the government come in and help you or not? You left to deal with it on your own. And say there's a death penalty. Is there one? Who does it apply to? What crimes? What are the standards of evidence to be proven guilty and executed? Again, also decides the rules for the economy. Economists just come up with recommendations, but it's actually the politicians that decide how it's going to work, what the rules are, who gets regulated, who doesn't, and so on. Then there's that $4 trillion per year that the U.S. government spends, and the politicians decide what that gets spent on. It's a lot of money. They and the courts, which they appoint, decides what your civil liberties really are. The Constitution says what it says, but the courts decide what that really means. So, which speech is allowed? Which can the government restrict? What's private? What can the government look into, and who decides? And what values get represented in what the government does? Your values, somebody else's values. And something as trivial as what's it cost to register your car. The federal government doesn't normally get into that, but the local ones certainly do. So active players, which are voters, get a say in setting the rules of what happens in government. Because it's the elected officials, like I said, that appoint all the bureaucrats that you'll deal with, all the way from the Department of Motor Vehicles up to student loans and so on, and the judges that sit in the federal courts and decide all sorts of things about how your life is going to be. And again, you're getting a chance to have a say in what you want. As I said, active players are the voters, and knowing the rules of how this system works allows you to influence it to make it work more for you rather than less. And again, yeah, we know you don't get a complete say, but voters do have a lot of power because many elections are very close, and just a small number of voters can decide who gets elected, which may decide who runs Congress and who the president's going to be. Our Congress has been narrowly divided for a number of years. Right now, just a few votes decide who runs the Senate, a few votes decide who runs the House of Representatives, and which party's in the majority has a huge amount of power in each of those bodies, and even if it's only by one vote, all the way up to deciding what does and does not come up for a vote in both of those places. So, yep, your vote matters. So back to these numbers again. Let me show you, cutting to the chase, showing you what those have to do with things. Each of them was an election that was fairly close. The famous one being President Bush, the second one, versus Vice President Gore in 2000. The vote margin in Florida, which was the decisive state, was officially 537 votes, which means that if 269 people had voted for Gore rather than Bush, Gore would be president today. In our state, at the same time, Maria Cantwell ran against Slade Gorton. She beat him by a little over 2,000 votes. Not very many out of about 5 million cast. And again, 1,000 people vote in a different way, and she wouldn't have been senator. Even closer, Tim Johnson versus John Thune, South Dakota in 2002. Johnson barely won, 527 votes. And even closer in our own state, back in 2004. Gregoire, not yet governor, takes on Dino Rossi, also not a governor, and she manages to beat him officially by 129 votes. I have that many students in a single quarter sometimes. So, if you think your vote doesn't count, think again. So, in this class, my job's not to try and tell you what the government ought to be doing, what your values ought to be, but rather to help you understand the system so that if you decide you want to influence it, you got some idea of how to go about it to get what you think you need to be getting out of it. And to help you learn how to communicate what you want to others so you can make that influence happen. So, looking forward to the class, and again, welcome to it.